Greetings, family. This is Kyle Dixon, co-founder of Precise Minds Filmworks, educator for 20 plus years, cultural enthusiast.
And I'm Kayode Bentley, president and founder of 4T's Teaching Teens to Think, whose mission is to help inner city youth identify their inherent skill sets in order to complete their education, establish a career, and ultimately start a business if they choose to. Professor at Fordham University, where I teach students who are pursuing their master's degree in social justice.
And with that said, welcome to the Grand Rising Collective, a podcast whose purpose is to cultivate greatness and excellence within ourselves and our communities. The name itself is from the morning greeting of Grand Rising, which we interpret as starting off the day with a greatness mindset so that we are able to rise to the occasion of whatever obstacles and challenges we may face.
And that's why we focus on engagement, relevant information, and empowerment for people in our communities who want to be and do better in their daily lives.
Welcome to the Grand Rising Collective. Greetings. This is the Grand Rise Collective show here for you today with another special guest we have for you, family. All right, so welcome. I am your co-host, Kyle Dixon, along with my other co-host, my brother, co-host Kayode Bentley, here for you as well. All right, and we're here for another edition of Grand Rise Collective, y'all. So we have a special guest here today, as I said before. Now, this brother here, he has been on the show before, right? He was on the show last year, and we had a great conversation in reference of politics, in reference of voting, elections. He is based in Georgia, the state of Georgia, specifically the city of Atlanta, and that is House of Representative member Erick Allen. Brother Allen, Representative Allen, how you doing today, sir?
I am doing well, sir. Thank you for having me back. I enjoyed the last conversation. Look forward to today.
Yes, sir. Indeed. So, family, we got a lot of questions to go through. This brother took some time out of his day, his busy day and busy schedule to talk with us. And it's definitely going to be a worthwhile conversation. So definitely make sure you tune in for the whole thing. If not, put it on your save and file away and come back to it later. But it's going to be a real interesting convo. So let's jump right in it, y'all. Representative Allen, what is your position in the state of Georgia? How did you get involved in politics? Just kind of give us our listeners a little bit of background.
Yes, so I'm currently in the state house, serving my second term, but would be running for my fifth if you count it, only because I ran twice and lost before winning. And I say that with pride, not because I lost 2 elections, but because of the persistence to make sure that this district got the representation that it needed. So I was in 2018 able to flip a district that was held by a Republican for over 20 years. And it took 2 bites of the apple. The third one, we were able to be successful. And so I've been serving in the House since 2018, enjoying the work that I do. And, in Georgia, we have a House and a Senate. I'm standing in my lane over in the House, loving that work. But announced last month a new venture, so I will be leaving that seat in 2022 to run for Lieutenant Governor. But still looking for the right ways to serve, my neighbors and my friends in Georgia.
Awesome. Do you mind if I ask? Before we dive into the real, I'm gonna give our family and listeners a little more background, if I may. Erick, what did you do before you ran for office? Because there might be people who are, want to do that and don't know that process. So what did you do before?
Yeah, so I've been in healthcare administration, mostly on the human capital side, for over 20 years. Prior to running for office, so I'll back up to not the immediate job before running, but a little bit before then. In 2007, I started my own consulting practice called Level 4 Performance, and we were doing, talent management consulting, primarily healthcare clients. 2011, I got sick. Ended up having 5 surgeries over 6 months, 10 inches of my colon removed because I have Crohn's disease. If you recall what was going on during that time, it was the period where the Affordable Care Act had been passed but not implemented. So when insurance started to shift over, it started to shift up, and I basically got kicked out and priced out to say you can't be covered because of your pre-existing illness. And so I ended up taking a job, and oddly enough, the job was with the Department of Behavioral Health in Georgia. So I started to work for a state entity. saw a lot of things going on working for the state, and in 2013, decided to run for office. And the only difference at that point was the Affordable Care Act had then been implemented. So I didn't have to worry about getting insurance. I was able to go out and get my family and myself insurance on the open market. And so most of my platform has been on healthcare issues, and how do we make sure that the lack of affordable healthcare, the lack of access to it, doesn't stifle people who have, ideas of a business. It really can impact ingenuity and entrepreneurship and all those things, because for everybody that talks about the Affordable Care Act and how it could impact small businesses in a negative way, think about all of those people who traditionally can only get insurance through a corporation or a very, a structured job. They feel trapped in that job because they can't take the risk to go out and try to fulfill what their passion is, because they didn't have access to the healthcare they needed. And so what you see is now an additional mechanism that allows entrepreneurship and creativity and risk, which is what we need in our capitalist environment. I mean, we need people to go out and take that risk and to do those things. And I think the Affordable Care Act is a way to do it. So I don't want to get into policy on that, but just my background, the reason I started to run, I didn't want to see more small businesses like myself go out of business because the owners could not get access to affordable health care.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That gives good concept, good frame. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely for some stuff we want to definitely go into a little bit later. So Erick, tell us about your position as far as like going for Lieutenant Governor. Like, what does that entail? What does that involve? Especially in relation to your current position. Like, how does that?
Yeah, I'm really off to an early start. I mean, this election for Lieutenant Governor is not until November of 2022. Okay. So I'm about 18 months, into, well, technically the primary will be in May. So I'm about a month, a year out, a year and a month away from when a primary would be. But to me, it was important to get that early start because I don't plan on resigning my position. Okay. And once our legislative session starts, you can't fundraise. You can't, it makes it harder to campaign. So I wanted to get an early start because one of the things I'm very sensitive of is, as I said earlier, I've spent the last 8-9 years asking the people of House District 40 to trust me to have voice in the state house. I find it in very poor taste to leave early after they've given me that appointment and that opportunity. I want to fulfill that obligation. I want to fulfill my commitment to them that I will serve out my entire term without resigning, which means I've got to get a very, very early start on building out the infrastructure of my campaign, getting everything up and running. Because next January to possibly, March or early April, I won't be able to do much as far as campaigning and raising money and doing all the groundwork. So a lot of that has to be done now so I can continue to serve.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. That's thinking way ahead, y'all. That's thinking ahead.
Well, and the field is starting to solidify. Others are starting to jump in. So it will be a contested primary.
Yeah.
Which I expect. This is a great opportunity. Georgia right now is the center of the political universe. Everybody. When President Biden signed into law the American Rescue Plan, everybody across the country should have said, "Thank you, Georgia," because we sent the United States Senate 2 senators that were the difference. What was the difference that gave us the majority to be able to get that done? So when you look at the progressive agenda. As I said, when I was out, campaigning for the 2 senators and trying to get them in the January runoff, if you voted for Biden-Harris and you voted for that progressive agenda, then it's up to you to come back out to the polls and get these 2 senators in place because we needed Reverend Raphael Warnock. We needed John Ossoff to take office in order to be the backstop at a slim majority in the Senate to be able to get some of that stuff done. So Georgia right now is really the center right now of our political universe.
Gotcha. One quick question. Yeah, you do a lot of stuff in there, Erick. Yeah. When it comes with you running for this lieutenant governor position so early, and you said when January comes, you're not going to be able to do too much because fulfilling your role. I'm not that affluent in the political process, but from what I've seen and observed over the years, isn't that stage at that point, January is when the election heats up and you have to do even more. So your approach is going to be taking you away from what other candidates is going to be putting more into. How do you see that playing out?
You know, it just means that I've got to do my work now, and I've got to work my tail off. I'm not afraid to do the hard work. I mean, like I said earlier, when I flipped this seat was held for over 20 years by the Republican Party. I have run in 4 of the most contested general elections in the state of Georgia. This is not, I mean, I'm not going to back down just because it gets tough. I mean, that's when we rise up. Okay. And so my goal is to do all the work I can and hustle between now and the first day of session so that I can continue to be a voice for my constituents, but also, you know, get out there statewide and explain to people why I think I'm the best choice to be Lieutenant Governor.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I think that's important, Eric, in reference of like explaining like the process behind that, because a lot of us, even myself included, like are not as well versed in the political process, but because of the things that are happening currently in our society and how we're during this pandemic, we're allowed to sit longer with a lot of things. We're not able to be distracted or, you know, derailed, even though it is happening, but not at a much rate as it was before. And we're allowed to kind of contemplate more and be able to like more involved in what's going on in other places, like I said, especially Georgia, because right now it is the premier place as far as when we talk about politics, especially when we talk about Black folks in this country at this moment, right? And also we talked about before in our previous interview, you know, Georgia and Atlanta specifically is seen as like the Black Mecca, you know, it's like, you know, like culturally speaking, right? So
it's the birthplace of the civil rights movement. I mean, it rightfully so has the monikers that it has. I mean, it's a great place.
Yeah. So going into your position and being able to overturn that seat, what is that? How does that transform into certain like law enforcement or certain state laws, city laws? Because again, when people talk about Georgia, we talk about before, it's not the state of Atlanta, it's the state of Georgia, right? So I thought that was really key. But tell us how that transpires as far as like, you know, law enforcement, law changes, because, you know, people are, you know, there's a lot of things going on as far as like law enforcement, police brutality, but also joblessness, you know, schooling, etc. But can we go into that? I would love to go into that.
Yeah, Georgia is a very diverse state. You know, I'm glad you made that distinction. You know, most people think about Georgia and you think about Atlanta, you know, and people, you know, often conflate the two, but Georgia is a very diverse state. I mean, you think about it, we've got, you know, one of the largest ports on the East Coast, the Port of Savannah, you know, right there on the Atlantic Ocean. We've got, you know, beautiful mountains in Northeast Georgia. We've got, you know, it's a beautiful state. It's a huge state. And it's very diverse. It's diverse in thought. It's diverse in race and just everything. So when you talk about the issue specifically in Georgia, it's a broader conversation than you know what people want to boil down to more of the metropolitan areas. What I will say is I think there's a way to balance the conversation in Georgia to make sure that we're having the justice conversation. You talk about policing. I think that justice conversation translates into so many things because, you know, there's a conversation to be had around economic justice. There's a conversation to be had around environmental justice. There's a conversation to be had around education justice. And then there's that civil and social justice that you have. I mean, so there's a huge opportunity to have that justice conversation. And it's not just about policing the streets, but it's about policing corporations that pollute our air, soil, and water. It's about policing school systems who leave too many kids behind. It's a very broad and complex conversation that needs to be had, and I plan on having. And to your question, that policing of the community is just one small area. Very important, very, very important. But we can't lose sight of all of the other justice areas that we have to have conversations about that impact everybody across the entire state.
Do you think? I'm sorry, Kyle. Get it?
No, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, do you? And I get. I mean, you can only do so much. You can only address. Well, I don't even believe that's true. I think Nothing is impossible. We can, and I think this came up in conversation before. We don't have to focus all our attention on just one area, such as the economy or the environment, things of that nature. We, as a populace, if given the opportunities, can address all these issues. Having said that, I want to bring up: do you see the manifestation of that taking place in regards to what just transpired with regards to the verdict in the George Floyd case this past few days, as a matter of fact? Mm-hmm. What is your take and perspective on that? Because my take and perspective on it is, this is the first time out of many years that a police officer was actually convicted, right, of whatever. I don't want to get too political, but my take on it is, don't get too excited about this. Yes, thank God, justice has been served in this case. But the fact of the matter is, and I would like for you to speak on this specifically, Eric, in regards to a system. Right? Because it's the system that needs to be fixed. This is just one Band-Aid put on a system that wasn't broken. The system isn't broken. The system, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? Chime in, y'all. The system worked as it's designed. So the system in and of itself needs to be broken down and built up correctly where it is true justice for all. And my final note on that, before I leave the conversation open with you, Eric, is, we have this emblem of this woman with the thing around her eyes, indicating like blind justice with the scales. In reality, that's not really true, because we're human. We all have our own types, preferences, biases, and things of that nature. But the idea of democracy was to put people in place that had the concept that everyone is created equally, black, white, Asian, what have you. So I'm tying all that in to get your perspective on the last verdict that took place and how it ties into your role in politics.
That is you said I loaded up one earlier.
Yes.
Let's break down a couple of things though, because I think you said something. This was not the George Floyd trial. This is the Derek Chauvin trial. And you said the verdict in this had nothing. This was about the actions of that police officer that was convicted of murder on three counts. Okay, well, two murder and one manslaughter.
Correct.
So I mean, part of it starts with, not making the victim the center of the issue that we have. George Floyd was a victim, so the trial was to seek justice for him. Now, when you talk about was this a positive step or was it justice? By no means was this justice. This was even just a first step toward accountability. The other part of the accountability comes in on the sentencing, because we know there's often disparity in sentencing for certain crimes based on race, age, sex. There's a lot of nuances. So this is not even full accountability. This is a first step to accountability. The second step to accountability is the sentencing. And then we can say he's now been held accountable. That's not even close to saying justice has been served. Justice will be served when we're not holding our breath, waiting on a verdict to come down on something that we clearly see was murder. The fact that Black people and just people in America had to take a collective breath and their hearts were pounding, and there was a seed of doubt that he may get off. When that's no longer the case, then maybe we can say that justice is in the conversation. But right now, it's just the first step or halfway point to accountability, which is what will ultimately lead to justice.
Damn.
And I'll tell you, if there's a bright spot, not many people have talked about this, but this is what the bright spot that I took away from that entire trial is the fact that police officers came out and testified against one of their in seeing what had been done.
Blue wall silence,
yeah. We've really got to make sure that we don't lump. And I say this, and I get criticized for this, but I want you to hear me out.
All right.
The same way I don't want to be judged based on the worst Black man you've ever encountered, our police officers don't need to be judged based on the worst police officer we have ever encountered. We can't have it both ways. We can't say, don't judge me because of what other people have done. And I think that seeing the rest of law enforcement come in and have those conversations and to speak out against their own was a very, very positive step. And that's what's, to me, more of an important outcome than just looking at the verdict of what happened. It's how did it come about? Mm-hmm. And that blue wall took a big hit. Mm-hmm. See so many people in law enforcement and first responders come out and say, yeah, what I saw wasn't right. Mm-hmm. That should give us some solace in moving forward. I know people will disagree, but like I said, I don't want to be judged on your worst encounter of a black man. Mm-hmm. And I know many police officers who do their job the right way and don't want to be judged based on what a police officer did on their worst day.
Mm. That's a valid point. Very valid point. One quick follow-up, Cal. Mm-hmm. I think the reason, and I don't know everybody's thoughts. This is outside observation. But I think the reason why a lot of people have mistakenly grouped a lot of police officers in that one category of them all being bad. Because for me myself, I don't like that, and I appreciate law enforcement. Matter of fact, when I was real young, I remember saying hi to police officers, and they what I wanted to be about. But I think what the sentiment is for a lot of people is, like you mentioned already, that blue wall, that blue protective wall, and you got and then we have to look at realistically and just keep it real, keep it a buck. We had All Lives Matter, and then right during that Black Lives Matter, and then following Black Lives, we had the All Lives Matter, and then I think what compounded that put the police or law enforcement in the center when they had Blue Lives Matter. So when you say Blue Lives Matter, and you're supposed to be in this position where you're supposed to protect and serve, I think that's what kind of grouped all police officers in that category, although they weren't the worst. But the fact that they had that campaign talking about Blue Lives Matter, I think that's what contributed to the division and why people looked at police officers in that type of way. But
it goes back to a fundamental, misunderstanding that we have about equality and equity. Mm-hmm. Some people look at it as a pie, and if I take this slice out, that means you got less. And so it's not like that. We can all have equality and have a whole pie. Just because the Black Lives Matter don't mean you have to now insert another life and another life. And it can stand, each one can stand on their own. And in the moment that Black Lives Matter really took off last summer and that was the narrative that needed to be out there. There was no need to have a competing narrative as if somebody was being left out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the other, and I won't even say them, but the other matters that came in, these lives matter, Black Lives Matter. And that was the moment of the day and what needed to be addressed and spoke about. It didn't need to have to be a competition between whose life is more valuable. It was never what it was about. It was about acknowledging and seeing me as who I am. Do you see me as who I am? And in that moment, the answer was no. And debatably, we can still say today, maybe that answer is no. And that's why it's important to continue with that narrative. So,
and to add on, right? This isn't one of my professors say this isn't the trauma Olympics, y'all. This is not the trauma Olympics. This is something that's very important and needs to be said because we've had years upon history to back up our sentiments and our feelings, and this kind of ties into Eric, we were talking about earlier, is reference of mental health. Healthcare, as you talked about before, even with your own situation. How does that play into today's time, especially with having access? Because a lot of, like we talked about before, unless you're connected to some type of job, we have benefits. The lack of legitimate access to healthcare is far and few between. And this is 2021.
It's one of those injustices. It's an injustice. So you got healthcare justice that you have to worry about. The disparity in services that are offered in different regions of Georgia. We have a significant amount of counties in Georgia that don't even have an OBGYN.
Wow.
Yeah. Think about what that does to, you've heard in Georgia the conversation around maternal mortality. Mm-hmm. How do you improve that when you have so many counties that don't even have an OBGYN in the county? Where a woman is pregnant and living and giving birth. How do you fix that? So the health justice is just as important as everything else. One of the things that we really, as a Democratic caucus in Georgia this year, was were fighting in the last couple of months of session is with the American Rescue Plan, Georgia, which is one of the states still not to expand Medicaid, could expand Medicaid at zero cost. Zero cost to the taxpayers, to the state of Georgia over the first 2 years. Okay?
Yeah.
The whole argument of not expanding Medicaid in Georgia is a political argument because of the president that passed it at the time. They still want to call it Obamacare and don't want to do anything that has Obama's name on it. So they dug their feet in the sand. I'll tell you, this is how we know. Last year, the Georgia legislature passed a measure that allowed the governor to go out and seek waivers instead of expanding Medicaid to provide Medicaid waivers. Okay. Those waivers were lauded by the Republican Party and by the governor and would have cost the state of Georgia $651 million.
Wow.
And only covered half of the people that would be covered by a full expansion of Medicaid. Wow. So you were willing to spend $651 million to cover about 200,000 Georgians by expanding Medicaid. But now through the American Rescue Plan, you can cover up to 400,000 Georgians, provide those OBGYNs in these rural areas, create over 50 to 80,000 jobs in healthcare. But you're unwilling to do it, even though it costs you nothing, and it's all because of politics. That is an injustice.
So, Eric, let me ask you this question. It might be rhetorical or a nonsense question, but aren't the Republican Party supposed to be the party of conservatives, right? Aren't they supposed to be the fiscal party, right? Responsible for financial management. Does that make? I mean, I might be a hypocrite. I mean, it might be a contradictory statement, but how does that make any sense if they're supposed to be this party that's supposed to manage fiscal management and all that?
I'm no Republican whisperer, but I would just say this is not the only contradiction that they have. I'm like I said, I'm no Republican whisperer, so I won't get into what they're thinking. What I'll tell you is the way I see it.
Okay,
is the contradiction of pushing back on Black Lives Matter, but then yelling at the top of your lungs that you're pro-life. Do you see that as a contradiction? Should you say I'm pro-life once you when you're in the womb, but once you come out, you're on your own? Or, there's multiple contradictions in that. And I don't think it takes a lot to really understand math is if the federal government is giving you a program in which you can double the amount of Georgians you provide health care to and save $651 million in 2021-22, I would say that's a good deal. I said, and I think it was in a press conference or somewhere I was talking about, I said, you can't beat free. I've tried. I think we've all. I don't care how creative you get with your money. You cannot beat free.
Right.
And it is a contradiction, and it's quite cruel, to be honest. We continue to deny, once again, justice. Healthcare justice is just as important as all the rest of them. Right. And it's almost a cruelty to not provide for those people who need it most
Gotcha.
when you have the opportunity to do so.
Got you. Real quick, I want to check, Cal, before you do it. OBGYN, does that tie in any way, shape, or form related to Planned Parenthood?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily. Trust me, the GOP nationally is not a fan of Planned Parenthood, and that's unfortunate because in a lot of these rural areas, they provide services that, quite frankly, our Republican legislature refuses to provide to people. So instead of being antagonistic toward them, they need to say thank you because they're actually filling the gap that our government is refusing and unable and unwilling to fulfill. Once again, it's a justice issue, and all of them blend in together. That health justice is just as relevant as any of the other areas where we really have disparities in justice.
And I think that's a key point because there was a sister that was on, I can't remember her name right now, but she was just talking about how, and family chime in if you know her name, but she was just saying that how can we fight for Black Lives Matter if we're not even existing? If they're killing us, we're dying. How can we even fight the good fight if we're not even, we first have to exist first and be able to live to be able to fight. You know, and I thought that was a key component. Like you're saying, we like on this platform, we talk about, you know, how to rise to the occasion and things like that. But if you're not alive, if you're not healthy, how can you talk about generational wealth if you can't talk about generational health? Mm-hmm. That's the primary first thing right there.
Mm-hmm. Everything is built on a healthy, educated human. You know, this is, and if you attack at every turn the education system and the healthcare system, then it is almost impossible for someone to compete at the level that they need to compete at, which is why you constantly hear people talk about education and healthcare when they're talking in the political, you know, arena, because those two things are so important, so important, and they're the first to get cut. You know, that we cut last year when the pandemic hit in Georgia. Mm-hmm. We passed legislation to give full blanket immunity from any corporation who may get sued because of the pandemic. But we cut $1 billion out of our public education system.
Wow. So
where are the priorities in that? When you look at, you know, those disparities, I mean, you can't justify it, you can't rationalize that. I understand, but there's some things where even when things get, I mean, every human, everybody that has a family, or even if you're by yourself, you understand that there's just certain things you can't cut when times get tough.
Oh my God, yes, that's true.
You know, and it's one of those things where we need more of a commitment to education and to healthcare when times get tough. Mm-hmm. And once again, for those across the country who saw this influx of federal funds in the rescue plan from the state of Georgia, we say you're welcome, because so many school systems and cities and states would have been just hurting if it wasn't for the Senate having a 51, that 51st vote being the vice president of the United States, and the 2 senators from Georgia getting that passed. I don't think we can underestimate the devastation that would have happened to school systems and health networks across the country. And to what you were saying earlier, Kyle, those are the 2 fundamental things that you need in order to really exist.
Let me, I want to bring up something that, and Kyle, by all means, chime in with that second question. But what does that say for us in the United States, where what's not in jeopardy is the entertainment industry, where you have these athletes and movie stars getting paid millions upon millions of dollars, right? Who are just there to entertain. But you have these teachers, the healthcare industry as well, simultaneously education system there.
Frontline workers.
Right. The frontline workers who are specifically there that kind of control what our future will look like. They are building our next leaders. So to see the priorities there, I think there's a quote that says, too, you could tell a country by the way they treat its women, or you can tell a country by the way it treats its, you know, the healthcare and the humanity of its people. What does that say about, you know, us in terms of just priorities out of whack? I just wanted to put that in there real quick. Go ahead, Kyle. I'm sorry.
No, that was pretty much as you're saying, Kayode. Like, again, those dynamics of we take away those things when times get tough, because we're like, oh, we can allocate funds towards other things, you know. But it's they say one thing, and that's one thing I think, Eric, with politicians, that a lot of people, even myself included, have gotten a little, you know, have during times got a lot of jaded, because they'll say one thing, they'll say, okay, we need to really focus on education. Education is the bedrock of our nation. But then, like you said, they siphon money out of education, put it towards other things that may not necessarily be benefiting the people as a whole. And then we have this kind of dynamic where you said one thing, well, we said one thing, but, you know, the country has to go on, you know, money, resources. So in reference to what Kayode was saying recently, how as we as citizens, we begin to play a part in the political process, even if we're not very trusting of the political system, because I'll be honest, a lot of people are not very trusting of the political process. How can we begin to, as citizens, begin to like educate ourselves, but also fundamentally start that process of becoming involved?
I would say educate yourself. Educate yourself on the process and the people asking you for your vote. You know, you talk about being jaded and people, you know, say one thing and do something different. Well, that's because there's no political consequence. You know, the average working person knows if you go to work and lie, you're probably going to lose your job.
True.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I look at myself in the position I'm in now, even in the state house.
Mm-hmm.
Every 2 years, I have a grueling job interview, and it's my job to make sure that what I've said I can do and perform to, I'm actually doing. And it's up to the voter to say yes or no, whether or not they believe that those two things line up, what I've said and what I've done. And the more people educate themselves on who they're voting for, not just blindly on party, or not just because you've heard that name for the last 30 years and they've been in office. Truly educate yourself. And people talk about term limits. We have term limits. If you don't like what somebody's done over the last term, don't put them back in office. You know, it really is that simple. And it starts by educating yourself and making those decisions and those choices. Right now, to answer your question, Kyle, the reason that people can get away with this is because there's no political consequence.
But you have a political consequence. How come you're the only one that has to pay the price or be accountable to your constituents, and it seems like nobody else does? Right. How can Mitch McConnell all right, let me calm down. Let me chill.
Well, because it's his constituent. He continues to, maybe he's performing to what his constituencies expect. I mean, he's a senator in Kentucky.
Yeah,
they're not, you know, and I'm not going to disparage another state. I'll just say that they may be in the position to where they agree and approve with what he's doing. The problem is politics are nationalized. So think about it didn't matter that Kentucky put Mitch McConnell back in the Senate. It was the other states who put their Democratic senators in the Senate that rendered him powerless.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. Okay.
So when people say all politics is local, that's not just some shtick. It does eventually bubble up. All politics is local, and it has a ripple effect of what goes on. So I would just say, make sure you know who you are voting for, what they stand for, and then make your decision based on that. And I know we'll probably talk later about voting in general, but I mean that. It can't be a situation of hopelessness, and it really pains me to hear people say, you know, kind of what you were the sentiment you were expressing, Kyle, because the system right now is built on hopelessness. The whole goal is to render enough people hopeless that they just give up and don't come out and vote these people out. So the more people feel hopeless like that, the more that those that hold the power,
that's true,
have the power.
All right, so Cal, can I interject? All right, so with that said, people should do their research, do their homework. You're running for Lieutenant Governor, right? First question, so that people understand and we can help them start their research and homework. Why this position? And then I want to do a follow-up question. Or Cal, can you do the follow-up question in regards to the strategies and supporter growth? So my question to you, Eric, is why are you running for Lieutenant Governor? Why this position?
Because I want to elevate. I want to elevate the impact that I can have. To be quite honest, and I want to stay part of the legislative process. When you look at the way the constitutional offices in Georgia are set up, most of them, except for governor and lieutenant governor, are not necessarily part of the legislative process. They're more administrative bureaucrats. So you have commissioner of education, or commissioner of labor, secretary of state. All these are administrative bureaucratic statewide roles. I enjoy being part of the legislative process. And I think where I provide the most leadership is in helping steer the narrative, have the conversations, be part of that process to hopefully not have some of the horrible legislation that's come out of Georgia in the past few years to continue to come out. I mean, it's some of the stuff that happens in Georgia is unconscionable. I mean, the day after, not the day immediately after, a couple of days after the shooting and attack on our Asian community, the mass shooting in Atlanta, the Georgia legislature was debating and ready to pass. The House had already passed it. The Senate was about to vote on it, a measure that would increase accessibility to guns just because it was political red meat to throw out.
Wow.
And so there's a lot of stuff that happens in that political process. And I'm not willing to lay down that fight just yet. And I think Lieutenant Governor gives you a unique opportunity to still be in that fight to make those wrong things right.
Awesome.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing we talk about. The attack on people of color. I.e. African Americans, Asian community. Oh wow. Yeah. And that goes, and also that ties into my next question too, with the strategizing of the businesses in Atlanta and in Georgia in general. There's a lot of small business entrepreneurship that's been popping up during COVID, right? That business that was attacked was an independent small business as well. How does Georgia, or how do you plan on seeing Georgia incorporate more of the small businesses as far as keeping the economy? Because it seems like, again, from our vantage point, that the small businesses, whether they be online or brick and mortar, are becoming more and more prevalent all over, but especially at Atlanta and Georgia, representing, when we talk about Black folks here, African Americans. How do you all plan to strategize and incorporate more of the small businesses into the Georgia, i.e. Atlanta economy? Like, how are y'all planning on about that?
Yeah, we've always had a issue, but not an issue. It's always been an opportunity to really embrace our small businesses in Georgia. And I think that, we're seeing what I would call a new wave of entrepreneurship bubble up through the pandemic. I mean, it's these COVID businesses. But keep in mind, for every one of those that are bubbling up and learning, and innovating within COVID, there are a lot that have fallen by the wayside because of COVID. So there's a shift. But I think the fundamental things of Georgia that we need to continue to focus on is, one, access to capital, especially for minority small businesses. I think that's a huge opportunity that we have, is to really focus on how do we get money or free up resources for small businesses that are trying to get off the ground in Georgia. I think we need to focus more as a state on supply diversity. Right now, the state really needs to think about who they're doing business with and try to make sure that we have a diverse array of vendors that we're doing business with, because everybody in business knows the holy grail is a government contract. And how many of our small businesses are actually doing work in local government, state government, and even federal government? Because those can lead to some very stabilizing contracts for small businesses. So I think it's a lot of things we can have conversations around of not only are these businesses popping up, but how do we make sure they're sustainable and that we're supporting them the right way.
All right, real quick, Cal, before you continue, can you elaborate more on what you meant by Holy Grail?
Well, no, I mean, when you get typically, so my consulting firm, when I had it, we would go after, government contracts from time to time. And I'll tell you the two contracts that got me through the recession were both government contracts because they pay on time typically. They're reliable. And they can really be the bedrock of a cornerstone of really getting some of those other contracts that you may want to get as a small business. And I'm talking more in the services arena. Those are good, but even when you think about something like the World Congress Center, which is run by the state, or any of that, I mean, what are the vendors that are there? Who's doing the maintenance? Who's doing the cleaning? Who's allowed to sell concessions? There's a lot of things that can be done to make sure that we have supply diversity all the way through, to make sure that our minority businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses are not getting cut out of some of those things that really do help stabilize a company.
And Eric, again, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't Maynard Jackson, he contracted Black construction companies to help to build up the now international airport, Jackson? Was it Jackson? Yeah.
Jackson International Airport. And the airport has been a point of contention in Atlanta for a long time, because a lot of people don't like the fact that the airport does give so many minority contracts.
Wow.
And we have to be intentional about it. It's one thing to give a nod and a wink toward Black businesses as a state, but we need to be extremely intentional and say, here's what we're going to do to diversify our suppliers, our vendors across the state, and go after that and be proud of it. And I think that's when the governor likes to talk about Georgia's #1 place to do business. Well, that's according to Georgia Magazine. But you would truly become the best place for a business when you start to make an intentional investment in minority businesses.
Indeed. Kayode, I don't know if you. I seen these.
So, so we're talking about small businesses, right? So just look at the MLB boycott, right? Do Atlanta, Georgia expect any other sport leagues to join the MLB boycott? And how does it tie into the NBA All-Star 2021, which was held instead of Indianapolis, right? Did a negative or positive effect on the city? What are your take on that regarding the boycott for MLB and how it relates to NBA?
Well, the NBA game obviously had a positive impact on the city. I mean, whenever you bring something like that, I mean, even though it wasn't fans in the stands and everything else, it gave some semblance of normalcy to some of the vendors in and around, State Farm Arena and within that area. So it was good. It was good for the hotels. It was good for the restaurants downtown. It was, it was not what we lost, because if you recall, in 2020, the NCAA Final Four was supposed to be in Atlanta, and it got canceled.
Right.
By no means did we get a replacement of what we lost by the pandemic canceling the Final Four, but it was still positive. Anytime you can bring, a marquee event into the city, especially during COVID, you can look at that as a positive. You asked about MLB.
Usually, yeah.
I was really mixed. So, I made a couple of statements when that first came out, because the election law passed, and then there was the push to swiftly start to punish and move and do certain things. I personally feel like Major League Baseball made a mistake by pulling the All-Star game out of Atlanta. And here's what I mean by that. Let me explain.
Okay.
When you look at the history of the Atlanta Braves, okay, the Atlanta Braves, there's a franchise that goes back 100. They're celebrating the 150th year. Started in Boston, Milwaukee. The reason that they moved to Atlanta was because Atlanta was willing to desegregate the stands in order for the Braves to come and play. Hank Aaron, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, one of the first blacks to integrate baseball, Atlanta Braves. I think when you talk about equality and what certain franchises stand for, I would find it hard pressed to have a franchise that could be used as a platform to discuss how the voting bill that passed disenfranchised minority voters and was an attack on minority voters, than having that game in Atlanta and using that as a platform to make that statement. So I think an opportunity was missed by taking an issue that you said is about a voting bill that will impact minorities and moving it to one of the whitest cities in the country. Because what that does, we just had the conversation about supply diversity and black businesses and everything else. There were a lot of black businesses on the line to make money and to benefit from having that All-Star game here. So you can, I get it that you want to pull that out.
Okay.
But who are you really hurting? I can tell you now, Major League Baseball, by making that stand, did not hurt the Atlanta Braves. They did not hurt the city of Atlanta. They did not. What they hurt was the young black man that was going to be selling T-shirts at the All-Star game. The black family that owns a restaurant 2 miles away from the stadium. The hotel worker who has been laid off a whole year that was expected to come back to his job because the hotel was going to be full, and now he's been told, "Don't worry about coming back in July." So I get this sentiment. But you got to look at you got to have a holistic view of what was hurt by doing that, and the missed opportunity of saying, you know what, we don't agree with what Georgia just did, but what we're going to do is we're going to throw our Midsummer Classic, and we're going to explain to the world why what you did was wrong. A huge opportunity.
Wow. Wow.
Okay. I had a lot, man. I'm trying to.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want to follow
no,
up?
I was going to say, Eric, because a lot of people are thinking, well, we pull out the money because money talks. Money talks. We pull out the money so that way we will have a bigger platform, and will hurt the pockets of the people in charge, the people who are.
You're not hurting the people in charge. You're not hurting. Just let's be real. I get it. If you want to find a way to hurt the Republican GOP, the Republican Party of Georgia, do you think they're hurt by these small businesses being told you're not going to have a full restaurant or hotel or anything else? If you think the Republicans that passed that bill are hurt by that, the same Republicans that were willing to spend $651 million for a voucher, but not take free health care for 400,000 Georgians, if you think they're hurt by moving that game, you are sadly mistaken. What you do is put money in those pockets so those people can then donate to a fair fight or go out and work to register voters and get people to go out to the poll and beat them. That's how you hurt them. You don't hurt them by hurting individuals' wallets. And I get a little amped up about that because I think people miss the conversation. You say, well, shit, doesn't that hurt them? Who got hurt? Everybody that hit that green button and voted yes, none of them live in the concentric circle. Well, not for the majority. They don't live in the ring that would have benefited from that all-star game. They go back to their home in southeast Georgia, and they're going to be just fine.
Okay, so when you said that they should have not pulled out, they should have stayed, got that, and you said they should have used that as a platform, right, to address the issues. How would that be possible if the media is not in support of it? You know what I mean? To get that message out, you would need support of the media. You would need support.
No, you don't. When the NBA All-Star game came to Atlanta, they ran a 90-second PSA in the arena and on TV that was broadcasting it, talking about Black Lives Matter and social justice. If you think MLB could not have done the same thing, if not more, to come and make the statement, stand beside those of us that were fighting for voting rights in Georgia, and say MLB stands with you. Okay. That's how the message would have been stronger.
Good point. That's a strong point.
Yeah. And that goes to speak with what we were talking about earlier with the young men, young women in Atlanta specifically, but entrepreneurship, right? Mm-hmm. And Kayode and I are both entrepreneurs. We both teach, entrepreneurial classes, sessions with the young folks. How do you think, I guess, speaking on the boycotts and whatnot, how do we begin to get our young folks involved in more entrepreneurship? Because we see that they have the hustle, we see that they have the intelligence, we see they have the energy for it, but yet it seems to be misguided, And, I don't want to speak on, but the water boys, is what I'm referring to, but just in general, though. Because it seems like a lot of our young folks' energy is very misdirected right now. Like they know that they want to attain better, they want to do better, but it seems they have misappropriated examples that are not really progressive and not really sustainable, nor are they beneficial for the long haul. They're just really just hurting themselves sometimes in the process, even though they want to do better. Mm-hmm. Like they're not going about it or know how to go about the right way. So is there any connection with, like you said, the establishment of minority businesses, also including young entrepreneurs as well?
Yeah, that falls to me under some of what I talk, with the economic justice part, and I hate to keep going back to it. I'm not trying to give a stump speech, but
right.
The reason that's important is, some people call it the tangibility of the possibility.
Yeah.
Can you touch and feel and see what Black success looks like? You can talk about the possibility, but do the young people have the tangibility? Can they sense and touch it and feel it? And the more successful minority businesses you have, the more examples people have of seeing what that success looks and feels like. Mm-hmm. And so part of it is that, but it's also, how do we invest in our after-school programs? We have a lot of money right now that goes towards hope under what I call the sin taxes, so you can go and gamble and play the lottery, mm-hmm. and that money will go toward education. In the State House this past year, we had, conversations about online sports betting, legalizing that.
Right.
Legalizing casinos, legalizing that. Never in the conversation is there that those proceeds go directly to after-school programs. I think they should go to pre-K and after-school programs. If you think about where you can have an impact on those, we've got hope. and Hope goes to a college, you can, get that as a college scholarship and get that money and go to Hope, go to college with a Hope scholarship. But you can't give hope to the hopeless. First of all, you got to fix that piece that makes so many people hopeless. And then they can think about college.
Right.
But to so many of our young people, college is such a far-fetched dream because it's not tangible. Once again, the tangibility of the possibility. Can they touch and feel what's possible? And I think the investment in that is very important. And that's one of the things I've been talking about and I'm going to continue to fight for, is how do we take, if you want to legalize gambling, online sports betting, that money should go to those in the educational system that have been left behind the most, and fix some gaps in pre-K, after-school programs, and then make sure that we're fully funding Hope so that when they get to that point, they can go to college, more people on needs-based merit. Because I think right now you got too many people who can afford college getting Hope. Hope should be more needs-based like it was intended to be. And then it's a huge conversation that needs to be had around that. And I once again, that's why I want to stay in the political process and in the legislative process to make sure we're having those conversations and redirecting resources to where they're needed most.
I want to add to your point, Eric. You brought up a very good point, and I'm going to get to my follow-up question. It's just a statement, actually, what I'm about to say. You're very accurate in the youth feeling college is so far off. Personal experience. And my organization has a client called the Boys and Girls Club, and we deal with after-school teenagers. And I have to say, in percentage-wise, I'm going to give small numbers, but out of 5 young ladies in particular, I don't want to say it saddened my heart, but, it's like it just validated there's so much more work to do. I would say not 5, 4. Accurate. These are accurate numbers, 4. 3 of these young ladies who aren't even 18 yet, they were 16, 17, well, I'll say 17 years old, have a child, had a baby. One out of the 4 went on to go to college. So, I mean, that in and of itself says a lot to the point that you're making, where they don't even see college as tangible. It's so far off. But what they do see tangible is their community, their neighborhood, the cycle, perpetuating the cycle of being pregnant and they're not even 18. So that's the statement I wanted to make, validating your point, supporting your point. The follow-up question is, in regards to Georgia, how are the other cities in the state handling the COVID vaccines in regards to access and public gathering policies?
Right now the vaccine rollout is it's moving forward. It's one of those things where he got off to a rocky start. People were driving from Metro Atlanta 3-4 hours to get to a vaccine, in different places. And I'm like, well, isn't it more efficient to redirect those vaccines to Metro Atlanta? I mean, it was just, it hit a lot of road bumps that we needed to, we really need to figure out. And it was a lack of leadership. But once again,
obviously,
once again, you are you're pretty much on your own for healthcare, according to some of our Republican leadership in Georgia. So it really falls into the narrative that has already been set, which is pull yourself up by your bootstraps, find a way to get a shot, get down to it, and it really is. It's better. I'll put it that way. We're now to the point. I will say I'm very, very proud of the partnerships that have been formed. But the Falcons and Atlanta United play at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Mercedes-Benz is now a mass vaccination site.
Oh, wow.
No appointment necessary. So if you're listening, you're in Georgia, you don't even appoint. You can just go on the days where they're giving shots and get your vaccine. So there's some positive things that have started to trickle out, but it was a slow rollout, just like you would expect with the whole pandemic response has been less than stellar by our leadership.
Now, real quick, I got to interject this real quick. You know how I do, man. And I think I know Erick's answer, but I'm going to ask him anyway. Did you get the vaccine, Erick?
I already had my second shot.
I knew it.
I already had my second shot.
Because the last time we spoke to Eric, the vaccine wasn't, I mean, it was nowhere in sight.
Yeah, it was that. Yes, right. It was last
so
summer.
Real quick, Kyle, I know I got to ask Eric this.
Of course,
so Eric, what is your feeling about the people who are apprehensive about getting the vaccine because of the Tuskegee experiment and all these other variables? What is your take? Just your take on that.
It's a personal decision. It's a personal for me and my family, and for what I want for myself. I wanted to take the vaccine. Mm-hmm. I think it's a personal decision. I think as many people that can take it, the better off we are. And let me make a plug for those that may be skeptical of it. Mm-hmm. From a scientific standpoint, the virus has a lot less chance of mutating and becoming these separate strands. The harder it is to find a host. So the more people that get the vaccine, the better we are to control the virus and get back to normalcy, as sooner than later. So it's a personal decision. I don't think the government needs to get involved in it and mandate anything. But I firmly believe that the more people that get it, the better off we'll be, and the better off you and your family will be. Because no matter what your cause, no matter what your purpose, it's very hard to advocate for it dead. So, take care of yourself. Do your own homework. Yeah.
Got you.
It's a personal decision.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you're right, and that's where I tell people it's your personal decision. The variance is what's going on now. They say in the variance, the virus is variation, and going towards more the younger, younger people. You know what I'm saying? The young people, because initially it was for the older crowd, the elders at stake. But now they're saying the variance, which a virus does. A virus finds a host. It's
looking for a host. It's going to do what it's going to do what a virus does. This is no different.
Yeah. So, so like I said, it's a person's decision. Oh man, putting them on the spot.
That's not a tough question, because like I said, I think it's very personal.
Yeah. So in reference of like Georgia, and I do want to ask this, and this is in reference of when we talk about the gambling industry, the marijuana industry, as far as how it's populating, especially in the southern states, there's the quote unquote Bible Belt or whatnot. How is it transpiring in Georgia? Like, are people becoming more open to it? Is it legalized? Like, what's going on?
Georgia's a long way. Georgia's going to be a long way from legalization of anything. But from a medical standpoint, Georgia has come around significantly in the last couple of years. 2 years ago, we passed a measure to allow, medical cannabis. But the problem is, it was for THC oil. You couldn't get it. Georgia wouldn't allow anybody to manufacture it, so you had to smuggle it in. So we fixed that. Now it can be, so it's a slowly evolving conversation. Just quite honestly, I don't see Georgia anytime soon getting to a point of where it's a recreational. Wow. You see a lot of cities that have moved. I know Clarkston was one of the first ones in Georgia to decriminalize marijuana.
Okay, that's good.
I think you'll start to see a lot of local decriminalization and those local statutes changing, positive. But what other states are doing at a state level, I don't think we're going to be embracing. I joke with people and say, do you know what's 40 miles outside of Metro Atlanta? Georgia.
Yeah.
And Georgia is a very, very conservative place. So outside of that circle, you still got Georgia to deal with, and it's gonna be a while before some of those things really become in the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
But the one thing to watch out for that I'm very mindful of is right now, local governments are doing the right thing with the decriminalization and some of the other measures. What I'm very watchful for is the state interjecting itself and saying that cities can't do that, because Georgia has a history of not allowing the progressive cities to do what they want for. And I give all kind of examples. I'll tell you, one of the ones this year was the most egregious. They literally passed legislation along party lines this year that would basically make it tougher for cities to go green and become sustainable.
Wow.
So if you have a green initiative in your city, the state is stepping in and saying, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. The state we passed legislation this year along party line that says a city or county cannot decrease their police budget by more than 5%. So they want to get in front of that, the defund the police conversation, and say the state's going to interject itself and tell cities what they can and can't do. So when you look at some of the cities being creative around, you know, the decriminalization of marijuana and some of the other things, you'll start to see. I'm afraid that we'll start to see the state start to interject and say, no, not so fast. Here's what you're going to do.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Right, Once again, what's 40 miles outside of Atlanta? Georgia.
That's going to stay with us, man. That's going to be something we're going to remember. Zoning districts of housing, gerrymandering, and taxes connected to the influx of the growth in the city. What's your perspective on that, Eric?
Well, I'll make it a state, since I represent. I don't represent a city. I represent the state. So I'll say from our standpoint, growth has been it's been manageable. I think we've seen our metro areas in general. I mean, I think rural Georgia is losing population at a very fast rate. And, when you talk about districts and redistricting, I mean, we're in a redistricting year, so we'll be going into special session later in the year to start drawing our congressional and state legislative maps and all of that. And I think that you'll see more of an impact in the rural areas of Georgia and probably more representation funneled into the metropolitan areas. But don't let that make you think that there's a huge opportunity for Democrats in that, because it's still Georgia. Even though you concentrate more people, there's still a diverse thought. So, but the you know, we went into this year's census thinking there was a possibility of picking up an additional congressional seat. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen at this point. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, so there's been a lot of growth. To answer your question, it's been mostly concentrated in metro areas. We're losing population in the rural areas, and a lot of it has been the expansion of jobs in Georgia.
Does any of that have to do, or is that in any way related to gentrification? You know,
gentrification is an issue no matter what. I wouldn't say it's related to it. I would say gentrification happened because of it. You know, you've got to now have, you know, it happened because of
people moving. People
moving in, and people want, you know, and it's a cyclical issue that we have. And I challenge whether it's even gentrification. You know, sometimes it's just the obliteration of a population, it's just moving them out. I mean, it's if you're truly going to gentrify and invest in a community, which is, you know, by the technical term of it, that means you're investing it in for the people who live there. What I would say is displacement is happening, where you're investing in it, hoping people move out and others move in. So that's a huge issue, because you have some very historic areas in the Metro Atlanta area for the civil rights movement that have just been traditional African-American bedrocks,
right?
That are in jeopody.
Damn.
That's all around. I mean, you know, Kyle knows this. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally. And, you know, I was at home, and I was going down Jefferson Street. If you know anything about Nashville, historic Jefferson Street, that's Fisk University, Tennessee State. And there was a multi-million-dollar unit high-rise that was put up on Jefferson Street, and right down below is a Popeyes and a Captain D's and all the other stuff is still there. And I'm wondering how long is it before the community loses that?
Yeah,
because, I mean, seriously, that's not going to last long. If you paying a couple of $1 million for a penthouse, you're not too happy about the Popeyes with the line around the corner downstairs.
Yeah,
so it's an issue everywhere that needs to be discussed, and this is where the smart community development, you know, that's a community development issue. That's really a local. So you want to impact that. That's your city council, your county commission. You know, that's who's making those decisions on zoning. You know, that's a really, really important part of the political process, because it dictates who's in the area, who's living there, who's got to vote. I mean, if you one of the problems with the city of Atlanta, and you see this in every one of the mayoral races recently, is it becomes more and more difficult for the African American candidates to win. It gets closer and closer because of what you consider the regentrification is moving in more people who typically may not vote in the same patterns and blocks as they have traditionally. So Erick, would you say it kind of like it diversifies the voting, which kind of spreads it? I don't want to say spread it thin, but it spreads it out even more where it's not as concentrated. Is that what you're saying? It basically, when you're bringing in more diverse constituents and residents, you're going to have a shift in the political thinking, the shift in political power. You also have a lot of cityhood movements. I mean, this is an ultra local. I know you guys probably don't pay attention to a lot of the local stuff, but you have the Buckhead community, which everybody knows of in Atlanta.
Yeah,
has filed a petition to become its own city. They want to break away from the city of Atlanta.
Wow.
And what they would do is consolidate power. Where I live in Cobb County, we've got 4 different cityhood movements going on right now. Now, what changed? Well, in 2020, the majority of the board of commissioners for the county is now Democrat. As a matter of fact, we have a 5-person council, well, not council, but a commission board. All 5 are women, and 3 of the women are now Black. That's a huge shift.
Yeah, it is.
What do you see? You see cities popping up, and you can tell that it's a reaction to that, because one of the cities wants to have a city council made up of all at-large seats. Now, let's explain what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
That means you get 6 council members who represent an area, but that area can't pick who they want to represent them. The whole city picks all 6. So that way you can have a minority of thought never get representation, because they now have to be approved by the entire city. And those are the things that you got to look at and go, okay, so what's really going on with, it's yeah. All the words you want to use, yes. So
wow.
Hey, can I address something I saw on the I'm watching the Facebook thread over here as well, and someone asked about legalizing gambling to get casinos. Those are all things that are on the table in Georgia. One of the committees I sit on, economic development and tourism, we hear those bills. The 3 that are moving right now, there's a conversation around casinos, online sports betting, and horse racing, all 3 of which are illegal in Georgia. The one that has the most likely path of it being enacted is the online sports betting, and that's your FanDuel, your DraftKings, all of those. Those are a different kind of gambling outside of casinos and horse racing. The issue I have personally with horse racing, and I asked this in committee because it came up in front of our committee, and I said, has anybody thought about the horses that don't run fast? I mean, you think about I mean, seriously. I mean, if you think about if you think about the safety of the animals, the biggest issue around horse racing is what happens to that slowest horse?
Cruelty,
right? There's a lot in that, and the brick and mortar casinos I think are going to be more of destination type referendum. I think there are places in Georgia where they would be more welcomed, like a Savannah. Like people have talked about the underground in Atlanta. A lot of places where there may be some areas that are receptive to that, but I'm just not sure that that's something that's going to move forward. But anyway, I just wanted to address that because it popped up.
Awesome. Please, thank you, because I'm now looking at the comments on Facebook. I didn't see that before. We got to improve on that, Cal. All right, so I want to really get on to this. All right, we talk election law, right? Let's get into the election law, Erick.
You said election law.
Since we have these remaining 2 minutes with you, let's get to this now. And Cal, this is going to be a big one because Cal brought up how it's making the populace jaded with the hypocrisy and the contradiction. Conservatives supposed to do this and that. And we talked about this before, and this may lead into a larger conversation. It still seems, Erick, it really still seems that people have a level of apathy towards the election process. It really looks like they're thinking that there has to be, or there should be, a better way than the current politics that exists in this country. So my question to you, as you're running for lieutenant governor, as you're entrenched in the political process, you've seen how it worked for you. What is there anything that you could suggest, because you mentioned this before, that will spark people, just in general? I know you're not a specialist, you can't speak for everybody, but is there any like silver lining, or any, not magical word, that you can give people to help move them into really getting involved into the election process, including myself? I can't speak for Kyle, but including myself, like, because I already know about local. Right, you need to know your assemblyman, your congressman, build them up locally and stuff like that. But it just seems like the process is so damn long, and it's not going to amount to anything because it's rigged. So, can you say anything to that to try and motivate us, inspire us? Like, I know it's a lot. I know it's a lot. Tie that into the whole election cycle, man, because the election law and all that other stuff. Maybe that's our ignorance in it.
So, let me answer that two ways. So, first, it's incumbent upon those of us that ask you for your vote to produce something. And what I mean by that, I think and I'll make it specific to Georgia again. This reference, we had a very good election in 2020. Georgia, if you look at the Bible Belt, you look down here, Georgia was kind of like that blue dot that stood out in front of, Georgia. We voted for Joe Biden overwhelmingly. We put two men in the Senate. The biggest thing we can do right now to show people that was worth it was to produce. Okay. And what I mean by that is the American Rescue Plan. That was a big step.
Okay.
Getting that done. That should show people that if you go vote and if you put people in office who think like you, good things actually happen.
Okay.
If we would have had better wins across the board in 2020, then the George Floyd Policing Act would already be enacted. Okay. Right now, it's not. If we had better wins, we would have had HR 1 and HR 4, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. HR 1 is the For the People Act. All those different things that would have protected the districting and gerrymandering you talked about, or making these laws that passed in Georgia about voting null and void because the federal government would step in with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. All of those are things that could be delivered on if we had Democrats in office. I'll be as blunt as I can. Because they could deliver on some of those things. The reason the system, and the second part is the reason the system sometimes looks like it doesn't work is because we don't participate in it. So if you have a bike, and I explained this to somebody the other day, and this, you may say it's a horrible analogy and never invite me back, but if you've got a bike and it sits in your garage, and every day you walk past and say, this thing don't work. This thing don't work. This is useless. It don't work. It don't work. Then guess what? It's not going to work. It's just going to sit there.
Right.
But if you get on it, you activate it, you pedal it a little bit, you take it for a spin, then you realize, okay, this does work for me. But it's not going to work with you standing on the sidelines. The electoral process is not going to work. The whole system right now is built on the minority holding control over the majority. Because if you can keep the majority hopeless, okay, because I don't care what anybody says, the majority of thought in this country is not reflective of what controls power. And they know that. They know that. If we vote, we win. And I'm saying that to every Democrat listening, or everybody who does not think like the perceived conservative movement. If we vote as a collective, we win. And that was the message we had in Georgia, and it won. If we vote, we win. The only way you don't win and get what you want is if you allow to let the narrative feed into your head that it doesn't matter if you get on that bike. You just got to get on and give it a shot. And once you do, it's incumbent on the people that have asked you for that vote to produce and show you why that mattered.
Okay. All right. I got something for him, Kyle. I got something. All right. So no. I wholeheartedly believe in that, and that's the whole democratic process, and that's what for the United States sets us apart from other communists and socialists and all that other stuff. And this is from what I'm hearing, and some people may refute this, but this is the greatest country in the world to live in, right?
Absolutely.
But if you've ever been outside the state, you understand what I'm saying? So I get it. I completely get it. So I'm coming from a point of motivating and inspiring us to improve the foundation that has already been laid. There's definitely an opportunity for us to improve. So when we talk about voting, right, and election law and things of that nature, we had a conversation with one of our colleagues. His name is Kayode. And if you'll get a chance to watch it, he was bringing up some serious points in regards to the electoral college vote. That regardless of the popular opinion of the populace, it's that electoral college vote that actually determines, and obviously in terms of the president, who gets in office, right? So that's where I think part of the conflict comes in as well, where a lot of the confusion came in over the past elections we've had over the past 4 cycles, right? With Bush getting in office, didn't win the popular vote, right? And then this guy that just left, I'm not going to mention his name, what have you, getting in, not because of popular vote. So I'm hearing, if we vote and we use the system like the bike in the garage, I ride the bike and the daggone bike breaks, the chain breaks, this bike don't work. I'm just saying the point I'm trying to make in regards to how does that play out when we look at a system that the electoral college vote literally says we don't take the popular opinion because the popular opinion might be wrong. So we're going to leave it in the hands of this select few and elect college vote to determine who we put in office. And I know that's on the president's scale, but then if you look at scales down, what do you have to say to that? That
it doesn't scale down. I agree with the premise. Okay, we and the electoral college is a whole separate conversation. We can have that conversation and debate, if needed. But what I would say is the United States Congress is made up of 435 people. Okay. None of them are voted in by the Electoral College.
Okay.
Only one person is.
Okay.
Only one person is.
Okay.
So to do that is kind of just Erick's opinion is a red herring in the electoral process, because what you're talking about, you have people who don't even want to go and vote for their solicitor in their local county or city, or their city council member. That ain't got to do with the Electoral College. So we do ourselves a disservice by creating the boogeyman of the electoral process for one job in the country, and keeping people from voting for every single thing else that's on the ballot.
Good. I think that's it.
You've got one ticket that is on that, and somebody you write 2 people. You got the president and vice president. That's all you have for the electoral college. That's it. Every other position that is elected is elected by the popular vote. So I get it. I get it.
Good point.
It's one of those things where if we harp on that, does the electoral college need to be reformed? Absolutely. It is. The whole algorithm. And I'll tell you that the main reason why you have the argument now of the DC statehood and Puerto Rico, statehood and all this other stuff. All of that is the reason they're fighting that so hard is also because of things like the electoral college, Senate, because then you'd have to give them congressional representation. You'd have to that would create 4 new senators that would now then balance that. And if you don't know what makes up your electoral college for your state, count how many congressional seats you have and then add your 2 senators. It's really that simple.
Okay.
All it is.
Easy math.
Very easy math. Georgia has 16 electoral votes because we have 14 congressional districts and 2 senators. There's a 16 votes. That's literally all. I mean, that's the math. Okay. So the reason you got to get the 270 is because the 435. I mean, it really is simple math when you look at it. Okay. So people like to make it the boogeyman and all this other stuff, but the same representation that we have in Congress is the exact same as the Electoral College.
I'm sorry, Cal. I just wanted to that helps a great deal for me because I think I think that's where the apathy comes in. Because it's only been the past 5-10 years, right, where we started to see the discrepancies regarding the electoral college vote. I think President Obama was a big part of that, right? Where people, there's been the longest, if ever, that there's been such a large turnout to vote when President Barack Obama came. I think that kind of woke people up to the whole election process. Things are going well. So
the tangible possible thing that Eric,
the tangible possible thing. So Eric, thank you so much, because I think that needs to be the clear distinction. I think people need to get out their head in regards to the process for electing the president being the same or trickle down to your local politician. So when you said that, so on the local level, not the president level, on the local level, the popular count votes. So if we get behind our local politicians in the area, then our voice will be heard with no voice.
Your voice is definitely heard. I mean, all politics is local, and if you do that, and more people start turning up, the electoral college is going to work the way that it was originally intended, and be more reflective of the general population. And I'll just say real quick, the reason the electoral college was put into play was so that not one state could dominate electorally. So when you think about Trump losing by the 2 million votes or whatever else, those were all, let's just say, in California. Do you really want a system where California and New York pick your, so
right? Because
they could easily be Texas in a couple of years. That's now bigger than, so
yeah,
there were reasons why it was put in. So
Eric, thank you so much, brother.
Don't let people put that in. I mean, sometimes I hear people have that argument, and they've had conversations with people who don't even think like them, and they're putting that in their head once again to keep you from voting. To keep you, if they can keep you hopeless, and I said that earlier, then the minority of thought can hold all the power over the majority. And right now, that's kind of the system where we have the majority being overwhelmed and run basically by the minority in this country.
That's right.
Okay, and we've had, and they're clean. They're doing everything they can to cling on to that power. Situations, and now we're at that point where we're doing the same thing. People question about the apartheid. How are they able to do that? Was a minority holding control over the majority. And I'm not comparing the United States to that at all at this point. I'm just saying there are situations you can look at where the minority has created rules to institute itself to stay in power.
Yes.
And that's all that we're seeing. And the only way to rise up against that is to vote.
Yep. Exercise your right to vote. Exercise your voice.
Take that away from you.
Eric, thank you so much. Now that motivated me. Now that gave me more. Nah, seriously, because it now lets me know my voice does count. I was just confused by what I was experiencing, what I was seeing, but hearing from you, Eric, you're actually in this. This is not hearsay, Kyle. This isn't someone who's not in this. This is someone who's actually in the system that knows. Now lets me know, I need to really pay attention to my local authority. I need to really pay attention to those in office locally, because that's where my voice is heard, and that's where I can have the most impact. Eric, thank you, bro. I'm gonna share this information with those of my colleagues, starting with Cal, because Cal is involved in it. Now you just heard from my question, brother.
Right. And before I want to go to the last question, I want to speaking on that, I definitely want to send like a big shout out to Senator Thelma Harper in the next man. She just recently transitioned. She passed away. And I definitely want to give her, her legacy and shout out, because when we talk about local politics, she's definitely influential, both of us, so, I definitely got to give her flowers, man. I hope you flowers while she was here. So for sure, seriously.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Senator Thelma Harper was the first Black woman Senate seat in Nashville, in Tennessee, state of Tennessee. So she was huge in the community. In my community that I grew up in,
she was everywhere. She was
everywhere.
I think she actually served on the city council, and then in the House, state House, and then the state Senate. And I mean, was one of the first elected officials I ever ran in, had a contact with, relationship growing up. Because she did everything.
She did.
And
very hands-on.
I think there was, I'm looking over here because I think I got it, but I think I even got a letter from her when I graduated high school.
Wow.
I mean, she was just one of those that was truly, 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 truly a public servant, and died at the age of 80. this past week. And yeah, so it was everything that you think about when you think about public servant, especially in the minority community.
Definitely. She was definitely grassroots, very hands-on. Always saw her, always vocal, always very personable. You know, like Erick is saying, very personable. That's my first contact as far as person of color, Black woman, you know, doing a thing, you know, about the community, you know, take no charge either, you know, like just really involved.
And this was in the 80s and 90s. I mean, this was
80s and 90s, right?
This was, I mean, it was rare to see. No, seriously, it was very rare to see a Black female in that position of influence.
Yes.
And I use that word very intentional because it wasn't about power with her. And I've always modeled that on that. It's about influence. Influence and authority. That has to be given to you. Power is something you take. But she truly led with influence and authority that was given to her by the people, and she will be missed.
What I'm taking from that is I think that was the ideal of a politician, right, who serves the people. And what you're sharing with me is someone who actually believed in their position and served the people. That's the essence of what a politician is supposed to be, you know, in that. Thank you.
We're gonna have a whole session on you and this word politician, because no, seriously, because I would challenge you. The problem is we have too many politicians. I mean, there's a point. One of the reasons why, and I told you, I have no desire to sit in this state house seat for more than 3 or 4 terms, because that is not who I am. My mama did not name me representative. And too many people sit in roles and positions for far too long. And once again, you think about the way Senator Harper moved throughout her career and the different, you know, levels of influence.
True.
And you don't, you know, sometimes you can sit in one spot for way too long.
Yes. True.
When you think it's entitled, I'm expected to do this.
Right. True. I'll correct the politician, Erick. Sorry.
Some of us do want to serve, and not just politics. So
that's real. Much appreciated for that, because exactly, I think people get that very, very misconstrued and take that as I can sit in this position and rock out. I don't have to be accountable to anyone but myself. And it's like, no, that's not the point. That's not the position.
All right. Final question, Cal.
Final question is, how can we support you, or how can people who are interested in your campaigning, your movement, in Georgia or in general, like how can they contact you? How can they become involved?
Well, you follow us. The website is allenforgeorgia.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Erick Allen, or on Instagram at Rep Erick Allen, and Erick is spelled E-R-I-C-K. But I mean, follow, get involved. I mean, we're actually coming up for an event in New York in May. Hopefully, we're trying to plan around end of May, early June.
Okay.
So I'll make sure you two know, and we can actually get together face to face, and
that'd be nice.
And do something. If it's face to face, we may end up doing it virtual, but but yeah, follow the campaign. As I said, in order to really make this effective, I really need the support. So if you've got a few dollars to spare toward the cause, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We really have to get cranking early, and as you can see, this is something I'm passionate about. I think we have to have the right narrative in order to get some things done, and Georgia is ready. Georgia is ready for the next phase. We've now proven that we could put people in federal office. Now we got to show we can put them in state office, and that's the next progression. And we've got. Everybody knows Stacey Abrams. We're praying she's going to be making her announcement soon. Of course, I can't speak for her. I don't know what her plans are, but I pray that by 2023 in January, I'm calling her Governor Abrams. And I look forward to having people of progressive thought up and down the ballot in Georgia in 2022. So thank you guys for having me and having this conversation. I always love talking to you because it's always intriguing.
Thank you, Erick.
Thank you from being the pessimist you are into being a little bit more hopeful about it, because we have a lot to be hopeful for.
Thank you.
And it starts with being active and being, we need both. We need to empower the agitators, and we need to empower the legislators. And when we do both, then we'll start to have some change that we need.
We'll have that balance. I would be remiss if I didn't ask this question. Eric, do you have any, you probably did already, but, you know, just let us know, do you have any final comments, any final words that you want to leave with the family or the viewers? You shared a lot, brother. Anything that stands out that you want to reiterate maybe, or final words that you didn't touch on?
No, I think we've covered quite a bit, man. Y'all do thorough interviews. I love it. It's,
You're right.
It's never just an hour. I'm going to start booking like 2 hours with y'all. It's never just an hour. But no, I appreciate the conversation. I think it's good to have these organic, conversations and just go back and forth on certain issues. I appreciate you all being in New York, taking an interest to what's going on in Georgia. We need that support. Cal being a son of the South too, you know, we both from Nashville, so we
both from Nashville, yeah.
So,
this university as well too.
But just know that we do here on the ground appreciate everything that people are doing nationally to keep Georgia on the radar, because as goes Georgia, I truly believe goes the South, and the South I think is primed for an awakening to start a more progressive dialogue of inclusion, of equality, and as I say, true justice in all levels: economic, healthcare, education, social, environmental, all of those equal justice. And when we get to that point, where we have that unified justice, as I call it, then we can start to truly realize the potential and have that tangibility of the possibility in our communities. And I am hopeful. And I am going to continue to push and fight until we have that. So thank you guys for everything that you do. I really appreciate you.
We thank you and appreciate you too, Eric. Thank you. I'm sorry, Kyle. Go ahead, man.
No, we definitely thank you and appreciate you, Brother Eric, man, for coming on the platform and take your time out to share your thoughts and views. Whether we agreed or not, you to have those conversations anyway, man. And when we take, not people say not take the emotion out of it, but keep the emotion there, but keep it, harness it in tune of if we feel passionate about something. We just appreciate your time and efforts and community in Georgia. And man, we hope the best for you and the state as well. And let's continue to have these conversations.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, man.
Indeed. Right. So family. So on another great episode, before we go out, Kayode,
we're gonna do our regular 1, 2, 3, and we do the peace. 1, 2, 3, peace.